In this podcast episode, Richard Reeves joins to discuss the evolving discourse around boys and men, highlighting significant political and cultural shifts from previous years. The conversation explores new policy initiatives, changing public attitudes, challenges around masculinity, evolving gender roles, the dynamics of dating and family formation, and the cultural ramifications of these issues. The discussion emphasizes the move beyond pessimism to a more nuanced, hopeful perspective on male well-being and societal roles. Richard Reeves outlines a marked change in the political landscape regarding boys and men. Unlike a few years ago, when the issue was largely ignored, especially on the political left, there is now tangible attention and action. Governors in states such as California, Michigan, Maryland, Utah, and Virginia have launched significant programs addressing boys' education, employment, male mental health, and mentoring. For instance, Governor Newsom's executive order mandates comprehensive plans targeting these domains. At the federal level, bills like the Men's Health Strategy and the Men Matter bill focus on mental health and fatherhood support. This political momentum has partly been driven by the 2024 U.S. election, where Democrats notably lost young men's votes, highlighting the electoral necessity of engaging this demographic. Although some critics argue these moves are politically motivated attempts to regain support, Reeves stresses that politics naturally shapes policymaking, and such engagement should be welcomed. He cautions, however, that the substance behind these initiatives remains insufficient, and his institute actively monitors follow-through to ensure accountability. A central theme is the shift from silence and dismissal of boys' and men's issues to raised awareness and policy action, even if much of this progress is not yet reflected in mainstream media or culture war narratives. Reeves describes the movement toward institutionalizing support mechanisms, such as commissions on boys and men, paralleling existing bodies for women and girls. He aspires for the topic to become boring, in a positive sense, integrated into everyday policy without fanfare, signaling mainstream acceptance and normalization. He notes the challenge of the activism culture, where advocates may be psychologically resistant to success because their identity can be tied to ongoing struggle. This phenomenon can stall momentum once wins are achieved, and Reeves calls for recognizing incremental progress rather than constantly dwelling on deficits. He also points out how overemphasis on social grievances, e.g., inflated discourse around racism, may backfire by diminishing legitimacy and providing ammunition for opponents to dismiss genuine concerns. The conversation touches on how boys and men are represented in media. Reeves references recent documentaries, including Ross Kemp's series and Louis Theroux's film on adolescence, that portray challenges faced by young men. He criticizes the tendency for such portrayals to be ideologically loaded or ambiguous, which can confuse public perception. These programs often lag behind cultural shifts due to long production timelines, making them feel out of sync with contemporary realities. In the UK, there has been tangible progress, including releasing the first men's health strategy and hosting parliamentary debates on men's mental health. This contrasts with lingering problematic narratives often seen in media that still lean on deficit framings like toxic masculinity, without offering constructive alternatives. Reeves elaborates on the cultural vacuum created by one-sided negative messaging about masculinity. Men, especially young men, have primarily heard critiques framed negatively, e.g., toxic masculinity, without positive constructive definitions of what healthy masculinity or manhood looks like. This absence has allowed other groups, including certain segments of the manosphere, to fill the gap with their own narratives. A recent development Reeves discusses is looks maxing, a fitness and body-focused movement emphasizing hypermasculine physical forms, often disregarding women and focusing on male-to-male dominance. If this movement grows, it could intensify intra-male competition and rejection of traditional mating interests, creating new cultural dynamics, but also concerns about mental health and body dysmorphia. This confusion reflects what pollster John Devevolf terms masculinity vertigo, where men receive contradictory messages multiple times a week about how to act, from man up to embrace your femininity, leading to ambivalence and disengagement. The conversation reinforces that fatherhood remains a core male institution and identity-shaping experience. Reeves stresses that men generally need to construct their value and societal roles actively, unlike women who possess biological roles in reproduction. He highlights ongoing changes such as the increased involvement of millennial fathers in childcare, leveling with some historic maternal contributions. Yet fathers still face negative stereotypes in media and politics, often portrayed as deadbeat or incompetent, a framing Reeves disputes using data on household labor division. Reeves critiques the notion of obliging men to domesticate themselves solely through women's efforts, and argues for a vision where men's masculinity and role as providers and nurturers are seen as assets, not liabilities. He believes society still values men's distinct contributions and needs to communicate this positively rather than disparagingly. Reeves examines the idea of society's feminization, a culturally charged claim often made on the political right. He disputes the claim that fields like law or professions overall have been fundamentally feminized to the detriment of men, noting that many remain roughly balanced. Areas with significant female dominance include education, mental health, and social work, all sectors central to youth support, posing challenges for engaging boys given a lack of male role models. He stresses the need to encourage men's participation in these growing sectors, especially as technological shifts make traditional male-dominated industries less prevalent. The increasing female labor force participation contrasts with stagnating or declining male participation, with implications for identity and economic stability. Reeves reflects on the political polarization underlying contemporary challenges in dating and family formation. Young women on the left are often told they are victims of patriarchy, while young men on the right hear messages blaming feminism and cultural wokeness. This mutual blame impedes healthy relationship formation and developmental milestones such as dating, marriage, and parenthood. He critiques simplistic mate value frameworks and marketplace metaphors as insufficient for capturing evolving relational dynamics that emphasize long-term compatibility, personal growth, and emotional investment. There's concern over rising ages for first births, delayed family formation, and childlessness, largely driven by economic uncertainty and heightened expectations. This delay operates as a ratchet that moves family formation later over time, increasing the risk of voluntary or involuntary childlessness. Reeves also discusses recent survey data showing that many unmarried young men want to marry and have children, suggesting desire remains, but circumstances limit realization. He notes that college-educated men and women maintain steady marriage rates, and that marriage declines occur mostly among those with lower education and economic means. The episode addresses evolving norms about the father's role around childbirth and parental leave. A debate sparked between Scott Galloway and Derek Thompson about men's presence in birthing rooms exposes differing attitudes. Reeves argues that fathers add distinct value throughout early parenting stages, even if they do not replicate maternal roles like breastfeeding. He advocates for paternity leave not as an equity tool, but as a recognition of dads' unique importance in child development and family well-being. However, he acknowledges limited research on the effects of fathers in birthing rooms and recognizes that cultural expectations and personal preferences vary widely. Reeves shares personal anecdotes on fatherhood and the profound transformation becoming a dad triggers in men's lives. He rejects framing fathering as domesticating men or merely enforcing gender equality, emphasizing instead the intrinsic social and emotional benefits when men engage fully as parents. Throughout the dialogue, masculinity is understood as a cultural and social construction shaped by history, norms, and institutions rather than a fixed biological essence. Reeves underscores that societies have historically made men through expectations, rituals, and roles that affirm belonging and purpose. A vital message for young men is being needed, recognized for their contributions as men, not despite their masculinity. Addressing boys' literacy, education, labor market participation, and mental health forms the foundational structural work needed to support men's flourishing and societal integration. Reeves critiques some factions of the modern men's movement and related activist communities that may hinder progress by dismissing successes or clinging to grievance identities. He warns that constant negativity creates fatigue and alienates potential allies. Similarly, he critiques zero-sum thinking about gender, where caring about men must be subordinated to women's welfare or vice versa, and calls instead for unconditional concern for all groups' well-being. He applauds coalitions forming around the recognition that demonizing or dismissing men is counterproductive, including some feminist spaces, recognizing that boys' and men's struggles matter independently of women's issues. Reeves encourages a non-zero-sum, inclusive approach focused on human flourishing. Despite myriad challenges, Reeves expresses cautious optimism grounded in observed progress, growing political will, and shifting cultural conversations. He stresses the need to move beyond pessimism and constant crisis framing toward pragmatic engagement and support for boys and men. He urges society to combat apathy bred by masculinity vertigo and conflicting messages, and to cultivate spaces where young men can build identity, competence, and connection. The conversation closes on the note that while the path forward is complex and contested, ordinary people, parents, young men and women, and communities continue to negotiate these changes earnestly, suggesting lasting positive transformation is possible.